Landscapes, they're places for people to live in and to work.
You need to understand those various perspectives.
Achieving net zero is actually a very tricky thing.
So all of these things are really important, but they have to talk to each other.
And the big question is how we deliver all these multiple functions that we all rely on.
Achieving net zero is actually a very tricky thing. Okay, so there are going to be multiple avenues to achieving that, including reducing emissions. So in the landscape, that might be thinking about agricultural operations, for example, reducing the inputs to agriculture, which are often quite high consumers of energy to produce fertilizers, for example. It might be thinking about how we manage the soil. So the soil is a very important store of carbon, and a lot of traditional agricultural operations are quite damaging to the soil and result in net losses of carbon from the soil. And I think we're now starting to realise that we need to rethink how we actually manage the soil in order to conserve carbon and ideally to get the soil to sequester carbon rather than release it. Just to go back to the original question, key things to achieve net zero will involve thinking about the whole system, including the inputs to agriculture, the agricultural operations themselves, the maintenance of the soil in a sensitive way to get the soil to sequester more carbon, as well as all of the other activities that go on around the farming landscape. Animals are a very important part of the net zero equation. Animals are known to release, particularly ruminants, to release large volumes of methane, which is a very important greenhouse gas. So in some way, managing greenhouse gas emissions from livestock is going to be a very important part of that net zero equation.
Achieving net zero in the land and agricultural sectors is one of the biggest challenges that we face. These are sectors which are inherently difficult to mitigate. Agriculture in particular, we've got multiple interventions which need to be implemented by many, many small businesses across the country in order to achieve our targets. And land use, we know what we need to do in terms of the types of land use change, but the scale of land use change is enormous. And still you're talking about potentially changes which will affect many people over many years. We need to take into account the drivers of land use change, which include many policy drivers and government drivers, but also the context of what's going on overseas, and the global nature of our food systems needs to be taken into account. And we also need to take into account the multiple trade-offs with other environmental outcomes. We've set very challenging environmental outcomes or targets for biodiversity, for water quality through the Environment Act that we need to achieve.
If I had a magic wand and I could make one wish, I would wish for a future where we are achieving a net zero carbon land management system in the UK, where the agriculture sector is not contributing to climate change, but actually mitigating the problem and actually making it less bad, while at the same time continuing to produce the food we need.
Obviously, landscape decision-making is very complex, and some of the problems that the Landscape Decisions Programme has grappled with over the last 4 years haven't actually been solved. And so we're just starting to get our teeth into some of these problems. They're very complex and tricky problems to solve. And we knew right from the outset of the programme that we weren't going to find the solution to optimal landscape decision-making in the programme. We knew it was going to be the start of something bigger, and hopefully the programme will lead on to other research programmes, for example, Land Use for Net Zero, which is in the pipeline, that will continue some of the great work that's being conducted as part of Landscape Decisions.